Trump strikes Moscow. The US storms Russia's shadow fleet. US forces smash onto a sanctioned oil tanker as Moscow freaks out and begs to stop the chase. Russia is burning and panic explodes in the Kremlin. Kamchatka is plunged into a total digital blackout, cut off from the world. Ukrainian drones tear through oil depots, arsenals, and logistics hubs deep inside Russia. Nowhere is safe, even the rare. At the front, supply lines collapse, routes are cut, and Russian units are hunted from the sky. Inside the Kremlin, power wars erupt as generals clash and Putin throws foreign mercenaries into a last-stage fight for survival. New weapons, explosive strikes, absolute chaos. Stay with us. What you're about to see is what Moscow is desperate to hide. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Farafonova here with the latest updates. US forces storm a Russian shadow fleet tanker. American troops boarded the oil tanker Marinera, which Russian media say Putin had tried to protect by dispatching a submarine and warships. Russia's state propaganda outlet RT released photos and video of the boarding. The vessel, formerly known as Bella 1, was sailing under the Panamanian flag toward Venezuela and, according to Washington, was involved in transporting Iranian oil under US sanctions. After US forces attempted to stop the ship in the Caribbean, the crew painted a Russian tricolor on the hull and told the US Coast Guard they were under Russian control. The New York Times reports that Moscow then sent an official demand to Washington to halt the pursuit. The sanctioned Bella 1 later appeared in Russia's official ship registry under the new name Marinera. But hiding didn't work. Consequences are already closing in on Russia. Breaking sensation! Russia's Kamchatka has been without internet for a week. Complete isolation from the outside world. No internet signal, no messages. Russians there are living in a digital vacuum.
The city is in complete chaos, and the internet is also down, complain locals. They say it's now impossible to access banking apps, and many businesses are not accepting payments. Residents are forced to wait in line at ATMs.
It turned out that mobile internet was shut down back on December 31st due to the threat of Ukrainian armed forces drone use. According to the regional governor, the restrictions will remain in place as long as the strategic and tactical situation requires.
Kamchatka is a strategically important region. In the current environment, we must be prepared for any challenge. The threat of drone attacks on military and infrastructure facilities is relevant not only to our country's western borders.
Meanwhile, a dramatic turn on the front line. Russian forces have intensified activity in the Serebranski forest as Ukraine's armed forces strike the enemy's logistics with renewed force.
The enemy's ultimate goal is to establish full control over the settlement of Dronivka and advance towards Platonovka and Zakhitna.
The hunt is on. Everything that moves or tries to hide is in the crosshairs: equipment, transport, and troop concentrations. Russians are being denied supply routes and any chance to regroup. Drone crews turned the occupiers' plan to ash. 2 invaders eliminated, 2 buggies, 1 quad bike, 4 motorcycles, and 5 shelters destroyed. The enemy tries to hide, but from the sky everything is visible. Russia is in flames. Ukrainian drones struck Russia's Belgorod Oblast, unleashing a fierce spectacle in the city of Staraya Skol. The region's governor, Vyacheslav Gladkov, confirmed a strike on the oil depot. According to him, detonations triggered fires in several fuel tanks. Some Telegram channels report that the Tatneft facility was hit, while others claim it was Oskol Naftopostach, one of the largest fuel and lubricant suppliers in the region. Even the deep rear is under fire. Loud explosions, massive fires, and evacuations followed. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, defense forces struck Arsenal No. 100 of Russia's main missile and artillery directorate in the Neisky district of Kostroma Oblast. In addition, Security Service of Ukraine drones hit the Kherson Plus oil depot in Lipetsk Oblast, sparking an intense blaze. The facility supplied fuel to 3 regions at once: Tambov, Voronezh, and Lipetsk. Moscow is burning. Ukrainian armed forces drones struck with precision as a ring of retribution tightens over the Kremlin, sending the dictator into a rage as he throws everything into a fight for survival. A new type of Shahed drone poses a threat the world has not seen before. On the front line, Ukrainian troops are cutting key routes, destroying equipment, and blocking reinforcements. Putin is clinging on by his fingertips, throwing foreign mercenaries into a fray. Who has ended up in the Kremlin's bloody service this time? All the details coming up in a moment.
The new year began in flames for Russians. Here is a drone attack on the bearing plant in Penza.
That's already an explosion. That's at the plant.
Explosions at the petrochemical plant in Sterlitamak, Bashkortostan, and at the oil depot in Usman-Lipetsk region. And this is only the beginning of the defeat of legitimate military targets by the Ukrainian defense forces. The friendly drones are not sparing the temporarily occupied Ukrainian territories either. Russian telegram channels showed the aftermath of a strike on a Russian forces strongpoint set up in the basement of a hospital in Kupiansk, Kharkiv region. The occupiers admit the effectiveness of the Ukrainian pilots' strike, as a result of which the Russian headquarters was completely destroyed and there is no contact with those who were there. This video exposes a rat in Kupiansk who was directing enemy fire at the Ukrainian armed forces. Ukrainians identified the enemy's location and captured him. And here is another successful operation to contain about 50 Russians in the Kupiansk direction. The enemy tried to use the Soyuz gas pipeline for a covert withdrawal and further buildup of forces. As a result of the operation, the Russians did not achieve their objectives and the situation in the area of responsibility has been stabilized according to the defense forces.
Kupiansk is almost entirely under the control of Ukraine's defense forces. There is so-called sporadic resistance from the Russian occupiers. These are blocked small assault groups that have no access to ground logistics. Logistics are carried out using heavy quadcopters.
The Russian Federation has reinforced its motorized rifle brigades in the Hulyapol direction with Bars assault regiments. Hulyapol itself has been destroyed by 30 to 40%. This is according to the soldiers who are holding the defense there.
The Hulyapol direction allows the occupiers to transfer operational reserves, taking into account the terrain. The terrain there is quite complex when it comes to detecting the personnel of small assault groups.
The intensification of hostilities in the Hulyapol direction has less military and more political significance for the Kremlin.
Against the backdrop of failures in the Russian dictator's claims about capturing Pokrovsk, Kupiansk, and Mirnohrad, it is extremely important for him to demonstrate to the Russian audience, and above all to the American president, the capabilities of Russian troops in occupying key settlements in Ukraine.
Hulyapol, the second largest city in Zaporizhia region, which in theory could allow the occupiers to gain fire control over Zaporizhia. But in practice, all the occupiers' grand plans are shattered by the Ukrainian defense. Therefore, in essence, the occupiers are opening yet another front for which they will once again be ashamed.
The start of 2026 is a real catastrophe for Russia. Oil refineries are burning, power plants are in flames, entire districts are left without electricity, and Moscow is bracing for a total blackout. So what lies ahead for this failing quasi-empire? To put it mildly, the outlook is grim. Here are the details.
Russia is waking up more and more often without electricity, heat, or any sense of stability. Almost every day, there are new strikes on the energy infrastructure. Massive oil refineries and numerous thermal power plants. It's quite a significant mess. And again, oil refineries. Entire districts are losing electricity, and along with it,
the process of heating, which involves the transfer of thermal energy to increase temperature, is a fundamental concept.
Accidents at thermal power plants, fires at oil refineries, and large-scale blackouts. These are no longer isolated incidents, but a systemic pattern in Russia.
Everything that mirrors the war onto the territory of the Russian Federation can undoubtedly be considered a success. Ukraine has done exactly what Russia did not expect.
In many regions of Russia, a power plant shutdown means not only darkness, but also cold. People are left without heating and hot water, even in places where there have been no strikes on infrastructure.
If you had never done it before, filling an entire bathtub with snow just to go to the bathroom so it would melt and you'd have at least some water. If you always had that, then everything was always fine for you. I came to get water so I could wash the dishes.
But if such failures happen even without Ukraine's involvement, the question arises, what's going on with Russia's energy infrastructure?
If they're still somehow managing with the cities, the Russians try to resolve the issue somehow carry out repairs as quickly as possible. How well that works out for their energy infrastructure is another question. But when it comes to villages, obviously, villages aren't electorally important. Not many people live there, so Putin, excuse the slang, just doesn't care.
What's surprising is that even in Russia, people understand that their situation is far from ideal.
If we carefully look at the official information about precisely how worn out our essential utility system is right now, it becomes rather profoundly alarming. And if you then add significant external impacts to that, honestly, it truly doesn't inspire much optimism.
Oil refineries are a particularly vulnerable point. They support not only Russia's economy, but also its formidable army.
Significant problems frequently arise both during essential repairs at large-scale oil refineries, because that particular process invariably requires a substantial amount of financial investment and a very great deal of valuable time to complete, and also with the complex task of repairing the intricate logistics networks, which often has a profound and far-reaching kind of house of cards effect. Consequently, when you cause one critical element to collapse or fail, all the other interconnected elements tend to collapse simultaneously at precisely the same time.
Repairs drag on, reserves are insufficient, and the winter period only amplifies the consequences of accidents.
These systemic problems with energy in the Russian Federation have become extremely difficult to solve, both because of money and because of the lack of all the necessary components for repairs, since some of them are, again, import dependent. In other words, Russia does not produce them itself, but buys them from abroad. And this is where, once again, the sanctions mechanisms come into play.
Of course, the bunker dweller spares no money for war, but when it comes to heating the homes of his citizens, he is very stingy.
Naturally, the level of discontent is rising, and this discontent is no longer just in rural areas where blackouts happen. Now, this negativity is actually concentrating in the big cities.
An energy crisis, even without Ukraine's involvement, is becoming a new reality for Russians. It's expensive, risky, and increasingly unmanageable.
Just one day, say, with temperatures at minus 20 degrees, in conditions where there is no heating, can destroy the entire system. So we really hope, of course, that it won't come to that. It's important to monitor specifically to ensure that the heating plants aren't damaged, especially if, for example, the strikes on thermal power stations continue.
When blackouts and lack of heat occur even without external interference, it speaks to the state of the system. For Russia, such failures are increasingly becoming the norm, and with the involvement of friendly drones, it's turning into a completely new reality.
Russia is fracturing from within. Behind-the-scenes maneuvering in the Kremlin is intensifying. According to sources, Andrei Belousov's position at the Ministry of Defense is under serious threat. Putin is reportedly dissatisfied with the pace of the so-called fast plan, and a full liberation of the DPR expected in 2025 has not materialized. Meanwhile, Sergei Shoigu is openly signaling his ambitions, ready to propose his own strategy for a swift liberation, and seemingly eager to return to his former post. Who will outplay in the struggle for the ministerial seat? We'll break it down in our report.
Belousov, you're out. There are rumors that Putin wants to replace the Minister of Defense.
Andrei Romish, do you have anything to add?
No, everything is going according to plan, very dynamically. I would even say, well, as Valery Vasilievich precisely reported, significantly ahead of the planned pace that was originally and carefully considered. Indeed, in December, we reached the highest pace for the entire year.
The thing is, Bunker Nova is dissatisfied with Andrei Belousov's slowness regarding the capture of the Donetsk region.
According to several of our sources in the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin is unhappy with the fact that Andrei Belousov cannot promise the complete liberation of the DPR this year. Andrei Rymovich upsets Vladimir Vladimirovich when he says that we are unlikely to liberate the DPR before February-March 2027. There are no decisions yet regarding the Minister of Defense, but we would recommend that Belousov give it some thought. About greater work efficiency, a source in the Kremlin close to the president told us.
Putin has not been satisfied with Belousov for several months now. One of the nails in the coffin of Belousov's ministerial career was the failure of the operation in Kupiansk.
The Western troop grouping captured the strategically important city of Kupiansk, which the enemy is unsuccessfully trying to take back.
The Western grouping's units liberated the city of Kupiansk.
So that's it, it's completely finished.
That's right, the city is under our control.
City controls Ukrainian armed forces, but Putin was lied to, told that Russia was making successful advances.
As a result, all of this creates a distorted picture of the actual situation. And Putin, who boasted to Trump, for example, about military successes, saying that we are making progress, it turns out that there are no such successes. Of course, as they say, every problem has a first and last name in this case. Every defeat has its own father. Putin doesn't want to take on this responsibility himself, but it's easier to shift it onto Belousov.
After the setup with Kupiansk, Belousov tried to make amends to Putin and began talking about problems in that direction. True, it didn't help, but Belousov was saved by the planned terror campaign against Ukraine.
Vladimir Vladimirovich categorically rejected the information that Kupiansk was not under our control. He was receiving reports of successes from Gerasimov and was himself making important statements about the liberated city. In the defense minister's report, the president saw an attempt to misinform him for some unclear purpose. To be honest, he was very angry and wanted to immediately dismiss Belousov, our source in the Kremlin familiar with the situation reported. According to him, Belousov kept his position only thanks to the strike on Kyiv that was carried out on Saturday. Vladimir Vladimirovich decided to give the minister a chance, as he so vividly demonstrates the power of Russian weaponry to the whole world and delivers crucial strikes against the capital of the Kyiv regime. In a way, you could say Belousov got lucky.
But less than a week had passed before talk of Belousov's possible dismissal resurfaced.
The arguments in favor of his removal could be the simplest ones. Belousov is not a military man, he doesn't understand anything. All he knows is how to count money, but war, that's a big pit, it needs a lot of money, so why do we even need Belousov, so to speak? The idea when he was replaced with Shoigu was to shake things up, to give new momentum, but as we can see, there is no new momentum at all. And I think that removing Belousov is technically possible, so that Putin himself doesn't have to take responsibility for these failures.
Kremlin-affiliated channels are reporting that while Belousov is being prepared for dismissal, one old reindeer herder is rejoicing.
I want to thank Sergei Kashkedovich Shoigu for what he has accomplished over the past years in building up the armed forces and giving them a new image.
The former Minister of Defense and current Secretary of Russia's Security Council, Sergei Shoigu, is already preparing a plan to return to the post of minister.
Rumors about Vladimir Vladimirovich Belousov's dissatisfaction have reached Sergei Shoigu. Despite several unsuccessful attempts, he has not given up hope of returning to the post of Minister of Defense. Sergei Kujugetovich is preparing his own plan for the swift liberation of the DPR. There was already such a plan in the summer, but Putin did not take it seriously, and literally in a couple of weeks he will present it to the president. Sergei Kujugetovich is glad to offer his military experience in these challenging times. Don't forget that under Minister Shoigu, the special military operation began and a successful mobilization was carried out. And there was a lot more as well. I think the president will draw his own conclusions about who deserves to hold the post of Minister of Defense more.
However, even such courtesy and Shoigu's efforts to return to the Ministry of Defense are unlikely to help. After all, if Shoigu were that skilled, he wouldn't have left the ministry at all.
You can want anything you like, but as we understand, Shoigu has lost Putin's trust. That's the main thing after all. And it's no coincidence that all his close associates, his inner circle, some have been imprisoned, some have supposedly shot themselves or jumped out of windows. That's why he isn't trusted. On top of that, he has lost his authority in the army. And without authority, as you understand, there's really nothing to do there. And
as for Belousov, his future career is quite clear. He will leave the Ministry of Defense. And it seems he isn't really against it. After all, he headed the Ministry of Defense reluctantly.
There are plenty of positions, enough sinecures. For example, they could send him to the Federation Council. There's Valentina Matvienko there, an old lady. She's already over 75. They could make him her deputy so that in a year or so he could replace her. Well, I mean, they could send him to the State Duma, for example. But they could send him to the Security Council. After all, they found a spot for Medvedev there, came up with the position of deputy chairman of the Security Council. So they'll think of something for Belousov too. As I understand it, Belousov didn't really want to go to the Ministry of Defense, actually. He's more from the scientific, you could say, academic sphere. He just got pulled in there. So this really isn't his field at all, and he was probably well aware of that. He knew that all the blame would fall on him.
The future of the Ministry of Defense leadership will depend on the chief of the Russian General Staff, Valery Gerasimov. According to experts and analysts, he is practically the only military man whom Putin trusts. Yes, he lied about Kupiansk too, but at least he's a loyal dog.
Valery Alexievich, your report is accepted. Thank you. The situation on the line of contact. Understood.
So it is Gerasimov who will be the one to propose candidates for the new Minister of Defense to Putin.
Most likely, it will be someone very close to President Putin, perhaps one of his most trusted aides, or even someone who is, in a very real sense, personally recommended by General Gerasimov himself. Gerasimov is widely considered the most loyal and trusted military figure for President Putin, primarily because he unequivocally did not support Prigozhin's ill-fated mutiny. We are well aware that General Popov and several other high-ranking generals had various dealings and connections with Prigozhin, which further complicates the situation and highlights the intricate power dynamics at play within the Russian military establishment. This was a huge blow for Putin. He felt vulnerable, realizing that the army was not on his side. That's why he needs a certain support within the army. He believes that Gerasimov is actually a pretty good military man.
Who will be the next minister? Avroni Arav? It's still unclear. But one thing is certain, Shoigu will not give up trying to stay close to power.
That's all for now. Stay with us to be the first to know what's happening right now. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon!